So, Brexit.
Oh my God! What happens now? What happens now?
Is there a doctor somewhere?
It's not my fault. It wasn't my. I didn't know it was loaded.
Could everybody stay?
I didn't know it was loaded.
So last week the UK voted to leave the European Union. Now, the actual process of getting Britain out is going to be sorted out over the next few years, but I think it's safe to say it's only a matter of time until Fortress Britain becomes a reality. Now, I've said this before, but I voted to remain in the European Union, not because I support the EU, but largely because the campaign to leave the EU has been spearheaded by reactionary forces, and, well, I wouldn't want to give those reactionaries a shot in the arm. It's not been, let's leave the EU to get rid of neoliberalism, it's been, let's leave the EU to get rid of the immigrants.
Everybody's looking for someone to blame, aren't they? Is it immigrants? Is it people on benefits? It was the fucking banks! They showed you them doing it on the fucking news! Am I the only person that remembers that?
Now, I did a brief segment about this on Dick Coughlan's left-wing propaganda podcast, which you will find linked in the description, and also Dick Coughlan has given his own perspective on the whole situation regarding Brexit in his latest edition of that podcast, which is titled Brollox, which you will also find in the description. I voted to remain because I think that under the current circumstances, a vote for Brexit would embolden the far right and contribute towards further antagonism and racism towards refugees and migrants. Marine Le Pen, the leader of the French National Front, is delighted about the result. Geert Wilders, a far-right leader in the Netherlands, is wanting the Dutch to follow suit. And in the description you'll find an article looking at some of the racist incidents that have occurred following the vote for Brexit. In the past few days, National Action stickers have been popping up around Glasgow saying the usual, this is a white zone, no communism, no weed, no sodomy, no drugs, blah blah blah. Stories have been coming out about kids at school from Eastern European backgrounds being told that they're not welcome. People are being attacked and shouted at in the street, and in my opinion this is only going to get worse. I don't think that the vote for Brexit has made people racist, rather I think that people who were already racist see Brexit as a sign that their views are more socially acceptable. Reports of hate crime have risen by 57% following the Brexit vote, and I think that's a dreadful consequence of the current situation. So what happens now? Well, we're not officially out yet, so the government has to trigger Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, which basically notifies the European Council of the UK's intention to leave and sets up negotiations for that over a 2-year time frame. The value of the pound has plummeted to the lowest it's been in decades following the leave vote. So whether any politician will actually have the gumption to trigger Article 50 and fuck things up any further is up in the air. David Cameron's resigned, he doesn't have the gumption to do it. So now they're all backpedaling to fuck. With Boris Johnson, it's almost as if he wasn't actually expecting to win. He just led the campaign to leave out of pure ambition for the sake of advancing his own career. Now that the Leave campaign have got the result that they wanted, Boris Johnson's just like, fuck, shit, we have to actually do this. Well, there's no rush for the UK to leave now. Well, we didn't actually have a plan for this, but irritable Duncan syndrome has said that there is a series of possibilities, whatever the fuck that means. In the meantime, let's build bridges with the Remain voters and intensify and continue the UK's cooperation with the EU. So, yeah, Brexit. Let's do this thing then. It's become clear that Boris Johnson doesn't have the gumption to trigger Article 50. Earlier he was hand-waving and saying stuff like, oh no, there's not going to be another Scottish independence referendum because of the Leave vote, there's no appetite for that, despite the very clear change in circumstances. Seeing as Scotland voted 62% to remain in the EU and now risks being dragged out by England, the appetite for Scottish independence is likely to be far greater. I know lots of former no voters who have now changed their minds over this EU issue. I personally think that if we aspire to be anything other than some rainy fascist shithole, Scotland should pack her bags and fuck off. Boris Johnson has now ruled himself out of the Tory party leadership race, which basically shows how much of a massive careerist he was being with the whole Leave campaign. So who are the other Tory politicians that are prepared to step up, trigger Article 50 and put the nail in the coffin of the Union? Michael Gove? I've no idea if he's running, but I actually think that irritable Duncan syndrome would have the audacity to trigger Article 50. I mean, he is a solid gold cunt. I think IDS would do it. He's got that whole kind of heartless, I don't give a fuck if my decisions hurt anyone vibe about him. The only problem is that he's so rightly utterly reviled by the working class that he stands absolutely no chance of winning a general election. If none of them have the temerity to trigger Article 50 and take the UK out, I reckon it's perhaps very unlikely, but nonetheless somewhat plausible, that a right-wing coup may well be on the horizon now, if they continually dance around like this and fail to deliver Brexit. This is how these things start, after all. As far as I'm concerned, Scotland should just run for the fucking hills and bail as soon as we can. So what about the Labour Party, which, instead of using the fact that the Tories are in a mess to go on the offensive, is now tearing itself to shreds? Labour MPs have passed a motion of no confidence in Jeremy Corbyn and are now going to hold another election for the Labour Party leader. Now, time and again, the Labour Party, through its capitulation to neoliberalism and austerity, has failed conclusively to represent the interests of the working class people that they claim to represent. And that failure of representation is why there is so much disaffection with the political establishment. And that disaffection is why there has been such a surge to the far right. It's why we've had this vote to leave in this referendum debate in the first place. If Labour get rid of Corbyn and put forward yet more lukewarm, corporate-loving Blairites, then they are going to just destroy any hopes that they had of regaining the working class vote. It's abundantly clear that these floundering cunts haven't learned a pissing thing. So what are the main priorities for the radical left in this situation? Well, first and foremost, I think it's a disgrace to live in a country in which ethnic minorities and Eastern Europeans feel less safe to walk the streets at night. I think that the rise in racist violence is incredibly concerning and demands an urgent response from us. We need to strengthen and mobilise our anti-fascist groups to ensure that we are prepared for physical self-defence in our communities. Scotland should leave the UK. As for England, the ball is rolling for Brexit there, and it's inevitable at this stage. Politicians are going to use the current confusion and uncertainty to try to push through the kinds of economic policies that they have always wanted to implement. They're going to intensify the austerity measures and put through more cuts and essentially say, well, look, we have to do this, it's a state of emergency, and use that as an excuse to defund public services. We urgently need very strong workplace organisation to defend workers from the onslaught that is now going to intensify, to ensure that workers' rights will remain intact, and also to put pressure on the Labour Party, or whatever will remain of the Labour Party, to fight against any further capitulation to neoliberalism, which is what has got us into this mess in the first place. As always, direct action gets the goods. So those are my thoughts on the currently bleak situation in the UK following the vote for Brexit. They've made their bed, and now the question is, are they going to sleep in it? In other news, Thunderfoot and Sargon of Akkad recently had a shit-tier debate about Brexit, and Thunderfoot, arguing for Remain, said that Brexit is a difference without a distinction. And that's obviously something we want to avoid. You see, it's very important. As soon as you start getting differences without distinctions, you're obviously asking for trouble. Just a casual reminder there that for anything other than science, Thunderfoot sucks. So yeah, Brexit. What a mess. What an absolute mess. I would say that I feel vindicated that some of my predictions have come true, but to be honest, I just feel sad and worried. And I hope that things get better. And with enough workplace organisation and anti-fascist self-defence, they will. And we shouldn't lose hope.